LAFM. Got something to say? It's Interactive Radio with Brian Carlton.
It's 14 minutes to 11 on this glorious Thursday morning. I will give you the weather in a little more detail in the not-too-distant future. Stick around. I've been looking forward to this. I always enjoy talking to, well, I enjoy so much, but as a professional broadcaster and journalist, just real people telling real stories always works better for me than some kind of spokesperson for the organisation of or the politician who's picked up the issue. You know what I mean? I received an email from, I'll mention her first name at the moment because I want to do what I did yesterday again when I spoke to her, check that it's okay to use her full name because she is in breach of the law, in fact, any number of laws. The email came from Prospect, Lynn in Prospect. It says, hello, we'd love the opportunity to chat with you about medicinal cannabis in Tasmania. Our adult son, age 24, is using cannabis for uncontrolled epilepsy and post-viral encephalitis symptoms, which he suffered as a child at age 6. Currently, writes Lynn, our government's being rather sluggish in their efforts to bring cannabis therapy to Tasmanians. We grow the plants, she wrote, to make his medicine. His life is remarkably different and better since starting him on cannabis just over a year ago. We're naturally over the moon that we can treat his epilepsy and residual symptoms from encephalitis with cannabis. It's completely non-toxic to him. And then in brackets, the pharmaceutical medications caused him serious side effects without controlling his seizures. However, appreciating that cannabis in all forms is illegal in Tasmania, the continual worry of growing cannabis and administering to our son is a huge stress on our entire family. She writes, every day we've had people contacting us asking about cannabis. Tasmanians are aware and they want to be able to access medicinal cannabis now. And then she sent me a link to the YouTube clip, which if you've had a look at, you can't come away from that without being unbelievably distressed. I was. The image of Lynn's son, Jeremy, having a seizure is just awful. The injuries he's done to himself as a result of the seizures. There's one picture there of an X-ray of his shoulder with God knows how many pins and screws in it. This is a really sad situation we're in. It's a short-term situation, I believe. There is a good deal of political will to try and do something about this issue and free up various versions of cannabis for people to use for medicinal purposes. As you know, there are 30-odd states in the United States where this is normal. It's normal, absolutely normal. I've got Lynn on the phone now, and I will. I'll get her to just mention her name if she wants to. She may not want to. Hello, Lynn. Now, what's it? Hang on. Hi, Lynn. How are you going?
I'm good, thanks, Brian. How are you?
Okay. Now, I asked you this off air yesterday, and I'm going to ask you again now. Are you absolutely given what you're doing, and given the at the moment illegality of what you're doing? Are you okay with your surname being used?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Then my guest now is Lynn Cleaver. Her son is Jeremy, isn't it? He's 24 years old, and
right.
just talk us through what happened to him as a kid first up, if we could, Lynn.
Okay, just briefly, Jeremy was diagnosed with suspected encephalitis when he was 6, which involved a month-long stay in hospital, being airlifted to Melbourne Children's Hospital and being placed in a coma to try and quell the constant seizure activity. It left him with lots of deficits. He couldn't walk initially, he couldn't talk, he couldn't feed himself. He recovered quite dramatically from that in the first 6 months post-encephalitis.
Okay.
But the continual seizures that, at that time he was having up to 20 tonic-clonic seizures a day.
So 20 a day. And look, just on the video, which I'm hoping a lot of listeners have actually had a look at,
yep.
that picture of his shoulder that was has had to be completely reconstructed, that occurred as a result of a seizure?
Of seizures, yes, continual seizures. So
wow.
his shoulder basically just wore out.
Oh,
and there is some risk with some of the anticonvulsants that they can cause bone disease. So he really,
Okay, so at the same time you're taking these anticonvulsive drugs, the prescribed drugs from the accredited medical professionals, and they didn't actually control the seizures, but at the same time reduced his bone density, which made the impact of injury, should he have a seizure, potentially worse.
That's
okay.
right.
All right, okay.
Yeah, often we found that the side effects from the anticonvulsants are worse than the seizures themselves.
Indeed. Okay. Now let's get to the illegal bit. You have been cultivating. Well, first off, how did you find out that that cannabis therapy might be useful for Jeremy? What was your first touch of that? How did it happen?
Well, basically, like a lot of people, you're seeing a lot of information come from jurisdictions where cannabis is being used as a therapy out of Israel and the United States.
Yep.
And so naturally, people who are dealing with conditions that aren't alleviated by current pharmaceutical medications were always looking and searching for answers and ways to help our loved ones. So basically, like our initial information came from online.
Okay, so the joys of the internet connect with areas where they've got slightly more sensible legal situations than we do. Okay, now you grow the marijuana plants yourself, the cannabis plants, and you process it yourself. How do you administer it?
Okay, so Jeremy's medicine is infused into an MCT oil, so he takes 4 to 5 mils 4 times a day.
Okay, so it's a liquid in a teaspoon, basically.
Yep.
Okay, and how has it helped him? How is it better than the prescription medications?
I think, the biggest thing for Jeremy is that we've been able to reduce the amount of anticonvulsants he takes, which was so very toxic to him. He was suffering from toxic events. He would be ataxic, he'd be vomiting, have blurred vision 4 or 5 times a week, and that was sort of lasting for an hour. And this would occur 15 minutes after we gave him his anticonvulsants. So they were really toxic to him. And having been able to reduce those anticonvulsants has improved his quality of life immeasurably, really. And it's helping with his insomnia, his behaviours, and also the seizures. He still has seizures, but we're under no illusion that it's not a miracle.
Understand, but so there are measurably fewer of them and less intense.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Recovers a lot more quickly from the seizures he has.
Right.
Which is great.
Okay, and presumably, one of the standard side effects of cannabis is, of course, an increase in appetite. Which does that help him as well?
We haven't really seen an increase in appetite for Jeremy.
Okay.
He has a really healthy diet anyway, which is all part, that's an important thing. And we also juice the cannabis leaves for Jeremy to consume, which is really, really beneficial for his health.
Okay. Now, presumably you're still in contact with the medical professionals with whom you've been dealing for a while now. Okay. Are they noting clinically improvements in Jeremy's condition since you started him on the cannabis?
Yes. His GP in particular, his GP has been very involved with Jeremy over the years, and he's noted changes, and we've reported benefits to his neurologist. Yeah,
okay.
It's all very positive.
All right, except that at any time the police could come around and knock on your door, and or possibly not even knock, and not only arrest you, but any other adult in the house who has knowledge, which potentially could include Jeremy.
Yeah.
And they could take your plants. They could take, in effect, Jeremy's medicine away just because of the way the law sits now. Now, you mentioned yesterday that you have had conversations with police, you've had conversations with politicians. Your situation is not a secret, and yet the police have not taken any action. Do you think that's because there's a sort of a softly approach to this, pending some law change?
I couldn't honestly tell you, but Commissioner Hine has said to us that Tas police aren't looking to target or prosecute. And should it happen, it would be on a case-by-case basis. But the issue, we're not fearful of being prosecuted. We're fearful of Jeremy's medicines being confiscated.
Okay, so you'll wear a potential jail term, you'll wear a fine, you'll wear court costs, legal costs, etc., just to make sure that Jeremy is continuing to get his medication.
Yeah. I mean, what parent wouldn't? When he tried for 16 years and everything's failed him, there was no way that we would see his cannabis medicines taken from him because we know it helps.
How has your life improved in the past 12 months? When I say you, just leave Jeremy out of the situation for a moment, but your family life, you've got other children, you've got a normal life to sort of have. What has it done for you as carer?
Well, as you can imagine, our whole family is geared around keeping Jeremy safe.
Sure.
And I think as a family, it's given us hope. You know, we didn't have hope prior to cannabis therapy. And that's a dreadful way to live, thinking, you know, when is the next seizure going to take my son's life? Very little to be happy about with that sort of situation long term.
No. And look, any parent listening to us now would be of the mind that you would do anything you possibly could. I've got a daughter about your son's age, and I would do absolutely anything. I would break any law. I would do whatever was necessary to make sure that her life was as good as it could possibly be should she be in a similar situation. There's just no doubt about that. I would do exactly what you're doing. And I've got a sneaking suspicion that a significant proportion of the audience would as well. On the video, you sent the link to the YouTube video, Lynn. The word you've superimposed words to describe scenes and things, and one of the words there that I nearly teared up when I read it is guilt.
Yeah, dealing with a loved one that has significant issues, you know, conditions of uncontrolled epilepsy, it's like a perpetual roller coaster of fear and guilt. You know, you can see on the video.
It's not your fault.
Some of the images that, you know, where Jeremy suffered injuries. Yeah. You just can't be there all the time. And sometimes, you know, we don't get to him in time, and then you see those kinds of injuries. But as a mum, you know, you don't want to see your child suffer.
No, of course not. But look, none of this is your fault, and you've done everything you possibly can to make Jeremy's life as good as it can be, given what happened to him, and which again was not your fault either. So it saddens me. It personally saddens me that one of the reactions you've had to this situation of guilt. You shouldn't feel that. You should have access to everything you possibly need without having to have those feelings, or indeed without having to break the law. I'm aware that there are trials going on all over the place, and I know that the Tasmanian government is in partnership with a number of governments around the country, including the New South Wales government, in conducting a range of trials on this. But really, the science is in, isn't it?
I would think so. You know, there's plenty of evidence out there, you know, that where cannabis can help different conditions, particularly for pediatric epilepsy. You know, it's huge that the amount of people, like even in Australia, we have kids that we're having up to 500 seizures a day. Yeah. And the cannabis therapy is controlling them. So,
I've spoken to other parents in a very similar situation, Len, and they're a little more secretive about where they source their medicine from than you are. And I admire you hugely for a whole bunch of things, you know, not the least of which is the way you've dealt with Jeremy as a disabled son and as a parent. But the way you're kind of hanging it out over the line here to raise awareness, to hopefully put a bit of pressure on the politicians to do something sooner than later. Let me just, we talked on the phone yesterday about a relatively simple solution to this before the full raft of new laws and new changes come in, which I believe they will for a couple of reasons. We've got a little later on in the show, for example, I'll be talking about industrial hemp as a material, right, as a resource, as a crop, if you like, which contains none of the active ingredient that gets people stoned. And then there's the medicinal side of things, which is what we're dealing with you. The plants are actually quite different in terms of how they're grown and the amount of active ingredient THC in them. The industrial one, virtually none. The one you need, though, does have the THC and needs the THC to be an active and an effective medicine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's different cannabinoids for different conditions, but you know, yes, Jeremy's medicines have, you know,
they have to have a reasonable quantity of that THC. Okay. All right. So where do we go from here? Now, I would like to see the government pass a really quick law. It's entirely possible. It can be done all over the country. That says if if there is a recognised medical condition suffered by an individual and it has been demonstrated and clinically demonstrated, in other words, your GP and neurologist both sign letters, etc., to the effect that this treatment has been effective and is working and has minimal side effects, then you would get an exemption to produce the medicine yourself until it can be manufactured properly and done properly. You know what I mean? That seems to be a short-term solution to a very big problem here that many people are suffering. And it's okay to say, oh, look, the trial will be completed in 2 years, which in terms of trials is pretty short. But you've got 2 years of day after day after day after day after day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean the issue with the trials in particular for paediatric epilepsy, we're under the understanding that it will be a placebo trial. So some children will not even receive, an active cannabis medicine, which is frightening. Okay,
look, Lynn, we'll keep on it. Stay in touch. Don't go away. Let me know if there's any developments. Anything I can do to help, please feel free. I don't... I look at it this way, and people go, it's drugs, it's illegal, it's marijuana, it's all that. Okay, let's just take a step back for a second and big breath. This state is known for its poppy production. Which is the opium poppy. That opium poppy can be turned into a whole bunch of things, not the least of which are morphine and all the various pain-killing drugs that are used in hospital. It can be turned into codeine, which is often mixed and blended in pretty much over-the-counter stuff you get at the chemist. So ibuprofen or paracetamol, it can be blended with, so it makes it a slightly stronger painkiller. It can also be made into heroin. Now, we don't have an issue with growing poppies here for medicinal use. I don't see why we should have an issue growing marijuana, cannabis for medicinal use. I don't have a problem with it at all.
No.
Okay. Lynn, you're very brave. I admire you hugely. But keep at it. We'll keep on it. We'll push this through to the conclusion.
Cheers, Brian. Thanks for the chat.
That's a pleasure. You take care. Okay. Say hi to Jeremy for me.
Will do.
Okay, darling. Thank you. Bye-bye. Lynn Cleaver, mother of Jeremy, 24 years old. Epilepsy, viral encephalitis or encephalitis, whichever you prefer. And as a medicinal cannabis advocate, I understand the need for medical trials, I do. But the people are leading this one. The people are already doing it. And if the doctors being seen, who are seeing these kids being treated with cannabis, if they can prove to their satisfaction, a trained medical professional, to their satisfaction, that this stuff works for that individual should be exempt from any criminal law when it comes to possessing and using an illegal drug. It just makes sense to me. Call me crazy, but this has got to happen.